The movie starts with a large, muscular man named Chris. He used to work as a surgeon in the United States Army but decided to leave because he was concerned about not seeing his family enough. Eventually, he made the decision to return home and reunite with his family. Along the way, Chris was taken aback by how much his hometown had changed. He observed children playing in the streets and encountered some women drinking excessively in an alley. Additionally, he noticed a factory that had once been operational but was now closed. While on his journey, Chris ran into Sheriff Watkins, who happened to be his neighbor. The sheriff suggested they travel home together, and Chris thought it was a good idea, so he accepted the offer. At last, Chris arrived at his parents' place, and his older sister Michelle, who works as a police officer, greeted him warmly. His mom and dad were ecstatic to see him after his absence of 8 years. They had dinner together, and Chris got to meet his nephew Pete. Pete was quite intrigued by Chris's military background and inquired if he had ever apprehended anyone. Later, in Pete's room, he repeated the question about whether Chris had ever taken someone's life, but Chris chose not to respond. The following day, while Chris was repairing his house's staircase, his childhood buddy Ray got wind of his return and whisked him away to the field where they spent their childhood days playing. There, Chris reunited with his old pals and Jay, who had become affluent and owned a shuttered factory. Jay disclosed his latest venture, a gambling establishment or casino. Soon after, they engaged in a football match, pitting Chris's team against Jay's. Pete also joined the audience and casually indulged in smoking marijuana with his buddies. Although the game kicked off with excitement, Jay's team, comprised of arrogant youths, resorted to rough play in their bid for victory. Following the match, Jay extended an invitation to Chris and his friends to his casino to commemorate Chris's return to the city. As evening fell, Chris and his companions reached Jay's casino. Jay generously provided them with funds to partake in all the games available. While Chris's friends eagerly immersed themselves in the gambling scene, Chris opted to observe the dancers instead. One particular dancer's performance elicited feelings of unease and discomfort in Chris. Interestingly, the dancer performed within a mirrored room, unable to see beyond its confines, whereas Chris could observe her from outside. To everyone's astonishment, the dancer turned out to be Chris's acquaintance Deanie. Sensing a familiar presence, Deanie illuminated the room and was taken aback to discover Chris watching her, prompting him to hastily depart, overcome with embarrassment. Following that encounter, Chris encountered Jimmy engaged in a dice game. Jimmy wagered $100 on rolling a 6, but Chris sensed something awry and urged Jimmy to proceed with the roll. Despite Jimmy's insistence on casting the dice, the outcome was a 7, a result unforeseen by the participants. Chris, overwhelmed with emotion, voiced his objection to the gamblers, expressing a desire to wager on the appearance of the number 7. Despite objections from the dealer due to protocol, Chris persisted and cast the dice himself, much to everyone's astonishment when it indeed landed on 7. Shortly thereafter, Chris requested a refund of his money, but without warning, a security guard seized him from behind, sparking a physical altercation. Despite his background as a former Special Forces soldier, Chris found it challenging to overcome the security officer. Regrettably, Chris succumbed to a combination of electrical shocks and physical blows, rendering him incapacitated. Subsequently, Booth, the chief of casino security, seized the opportunity to subject Chris and his companions to torture. Booth's excitement peaked upon encountering someone resembling a Special Forces soldier. Armed with a cutter, he proceeded to inflict harm upon Chris, who lay defenseless and wounded, bearing the brunt of his injuries. Chris found himself abandoned on the roadside, but fortunately, a compassionate truck driver came to his aid, transporting him to the hospital. The attending physician informed Chris that his assailant had intended to fatally harm him. Thankfully, Chris's robust physique contributed to his survival, unlike an average individual who might not have endured such an assault. Following a brief hospital stay, Chris received clearance to return home, with Ray by his side. However, due to his recent stitches, Chris's mobility was limited. Over time, his health gradually recovered, allowing him to resume his usual routines. One day, Jay visited Chris at his residence and offered a sincere apology for the misconduct of his staff. Jay assured Chris that he had terminated the dishonest employee and disciplined the security officer responsible. Despite Jay's efforts to make amends, Chris remained discontent. Jay then proposed that Chris assume the role of head of security at his casino, enticing him with a substantial financial offer. However, Chris, influenced by his feelings, rejected the offer. Instead, he opted to visit the police station to file a report regarding the prior day's incident. Sheriff Watkins rejected his request, citing the closed nature of the case. Moreover, he cautioned Chris about the fortunate outcome of not facing a lawsuit from the casino for instigating turmoil. This exacerbated Chris's frustration as he struggled to comprehend the state of affairs in his hometown. He expressed his determination to halt the ongoing injustices to the sheriff before departing. The following day, Chris received news that Pete had indulged excessively in drugs at his friend's residence. Reacting swiftly, he hastened to the location. Upon arrival, Chris inquired of Pete's source for the drugs. Pete confessed to obtaining them from the casino security guard, greatly agitating Chris. Consequently, he retrieved a weapon from home but opted not to wield it upon returning to the casino. Instead, he chose a wooden block. Upon entering, chaos ensued as Chris incapacitated the security personnel, even fracturing one's arm. His ire was directed at Booth, who had previously harmed him. After releasing his frustration, Chris departed but was pursued and apprehended by the police en route. During the court proceedings determining Chris's future, the casino presented its testimony first, portraying themselves as blameless victims and attempting to shift responsibility onto Chris for all the events. When Chris's turn to defend himself arrived, he found himself compelled to speak due to his lawyer's limited assistance. Addressing everyone in the courtroom, prosecutors, the judge, and the audience, Chris divulged the truth about the incidents. Additionally, he outlined his intention that if acquitted, he would seek to become the sheriff and address the city's challenges. Chris showcased the injuries inflicted by the casino security personnel to the prosecutor, the public, and the audience. After thorough deliberation, the prosecutor rendered Chris not guilty, paving the way for him to assume the sheriff's role in the upcoming term. While performing his duties as sheriff, Chris came across Jay during a patrol and requested to see Jay's driver's license and vehicle registration. However, Jay harbored resentment towards Chris and brought up Chris's past as a failed soldier, provoking his anger. Upon returning to the office, Sheriff Watkins suggested that Chris appoint his friends as deputies due to their outstanding performance. Chris casually responded by stating that they were all dismissed. Consequently, the office remained empty as all the deputies were now unemployed, prompting Chris to seek assistance in managing his responsibilities. He encountered Ray, who despite having a criminal history, agreed to serve as his deputy. Their initial priority was to address the drug issue in their city, for which Chris sought Ray's assistance as he was familiar with the local drug dealer. Following an investigation, Booth emerged as the prime suspect based on the gathered evidence. Ray examined Booth and found a stash of drugs concealed in his socks. When Booth declined to disclose if there were additional drugs elsewhere, Ray promptly decided to search Booth's car, which was undergoing repairs, without hesitation. Ray and Chris conducted a thorough inspection of Booth's car. Regrettably, they found no additional drugs there. Subsequently, Booth became greatly agitated by the search of his car. He cautioned Chris and Ray that his associates might retaliate for their actions. Nonetheless, Chris disregarded Booth's warnings and assured him confidently that he wasn't intimidated. Booth was eventually apprehended and taken to the police station in the hope that he would provide valuable information. Concerned about his family's safety, Chris asked Ray to check on them while he stayed overnight at the office to monitor Booth. After Ray departed, Dana arrived with food. The following day, Chris inspected Booth's cell, only to have his patrol car suddenly explode. Shocked, he realized it was Jay's associates who orchestrated the explosion and started shooting at his office, heedless of Booth's presence. Under pressure, Chris broke into his office for safety. Later, he visited Booth, who disclosed that the drugs originated from Jay's clandestine factory. Just as Chris contemplated releasing Booth, he was unexpectedly shot by one of his own associates. Shortly afterward, Chris pursued Dini and engaged in combat with Jay's henchmen individually. Concurrently, Ray safeguarded Chris's residence and encountered an assault from Jay's associates. Regrettably, Ray sustained a gunshot wound, which could have been severe, but he retaliated with unwavering resolve. He even managed to injure one of Jay's men with a stab wound, and when another attempted to intervene, Ray subdued him as well. Chris abruptly arrived and became entangled in the chaos, resulting in a scuffle with Ray. Ensuring the safety of his family, Chris proceeded to conduct a more thorough investigation indoors. Inside, he encountered Jay awaiting him, leading Chris to inadvertently fall into Jay's trap and narrowly avoiding injury. However, he successfully dragged Jay down alongside him. They plummeted from a height, resulting in Chris spraining his leg. As Jay attempted to pursue him, Chris fled into the forest, with Jay in pursuit. It was there that their confrontation commenced. With the little remaining strength they possessed, They engaged in combat amidst the trees. Fortunately, Chris stumbled upon some wooden blocks, which became his primary weapon. Despite Jay wielding an axe, Chris prevailed over him, albeit sustaining further injury to his leg in the process. Chris insisted on Jay's arrest. Ultimately, Chris and Ray took charge of guarding Jay's casino and revitalized the lumber factory, offering employment opportunities to the city's residents. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Take care.